Hey folks, I'm Swag. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. I hope this is your future home for all content Lord of the Rings home. Now that the raids have been released, or at least chapter 1 of the raid has been released, I thought it would be a good time to do a very comprehensive sort of starter guide. This guide is basically going to be like the classic Italian dish cacio e pepe. It's going to be simple, it's going to be basic, we're going to go through that sort of stuff, but then sprinkled in, peppered in is going to be some good nuggets of information that I hope you find useful later on. Timestamps will be down below in the description, as well as any of the resources I use. That way you can just come back to one video and go to the part that you need if you are missing something, or if you got something, or you forgot something, or anything like that, right? Let me preface this video and start off by saying that you should play this game however you want. You should play this game in a way that feels fun for you. If that means you want to level up the hobbits or some off team, you should do that, because that's what's fun for you. And there's no point in playing this game unless it's fun, right? With that being said, this guide is going to be more geared towards how you can kind of optimize and be competitive in certain game modes. That's kind of the goal of the guide here. Again, I think you can do that with a lot of the teams we have. It will differ in your results though. And so I'm just going to give you some tips for being fairly competitive. This guide is also going to have stuff for both free-to-play players and people who pay. I just want to make sure that I kind of include both in there, because there's a lot of similarities, but they run into a few different scenarios or bottlenecks at different times, and I just wanted to kind of cover them both in here. The structure of the video is essentially that we're just going to go through each of the features in the order that you would unlock them. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Again, timestamps down in the description if you're looking for something specific. But with that, let's get started. So here's my free-to-play account. It's level 57. It's not quite level 60 at max. That's the max level. Basically, when you start out and you're going through the tutorial, right, they give you Strider, they give you Frodo, and they make you upgrade Frodo. You do not need to upgrade Frodo past level 4. Level 4, gear tier 2, you don't need to do it. You can just leave him there. You don't need to upgrade him. The Hobbit team, I know a lot of people are interested in it and think it's fun. It doesn't do very well in Arena unless you've got them completely maxed. They're a pretty good raid team, though. Again, you need to have them completely maxed, though. And that's hard to do unless you're level 60. So a lot of the skills that they need are kind of 50 plus, which is why I think people shy away from recommending them as an investment, especially for like early game, that sort of thing. So I left Frodo here at level 4, gear tier 2, just because the tutorial made me do that. But essentially, the squads they do give you are what are considered the Rohan 3 and the Isengard 3. You end up getting Eowyn from a chest, and then you get Eothane when you unlock Hard Node 1-1 here. So you have to go through the whole first part of the light campaign on normal, and then you unlock Eothane with the hard campaign here. And what I like to do with this particular setup is I just do Eowyn lead, and then Eothane and Strider. And yes, you can have Frodo plugged in there, but if you start to not get 3 stars, then you can just drop him completely and your team will basically be fine. I think a general good rule of thumb is that when you're thinking about upgrading skills, you should look at what levels are going to give you sort of an added additional bonus by either applying some sort of Bane or a boon or what. So I'll give you a good example. Eowyn's basic here, on level 2, you always gain defensive. Defensive is basically a block from the next hit that basically reduces incoming damage by 30%. That's a good skill to get up to level 3, right? Or level 2, excuse me. Her special 1 as well, call the ally with the highest damage to assist. That's a great add-on to the skill. If the skill is just giving you, if the skill upgrade is just giving you extra damage, it's maybe something to hold off on for a little while. And then specifically when it comes to healers and their healing abilities, Halbarad isn't technically a healer, but he does have a heal. I would say generally you want healing abilities to get to level 5. That's when they really seem to start to turn on, especially for Halbarad, but even, let's take Dunhar, for example, who's the healer for the Isengard 3. Right, his level 5 ability gives him that plus 2% additional healing, which is great. Percent-based healing is better than just the flat healing, and then it also reduces the stamina cost to 3, which is massive, right? So pretty much all the healers need level 5 on their healing skill for it to like really become effective, in my opinion. So we went over Eowyn, but some other ones that are worth upgrading are something like Eothane's basic, right? Always inflicting expose, armor is reduced by 50%. This basically makes your team hit harder. You have to upgrade Strider for a quest. We'll talk about quests in a little bit here, but I also think one person worth mentioning that you're going to get, which is Ugluk, right? You may not have him unlocked right away, but you will get him. He's one of the starter characters. And I think people don't know whether they should do this skill or not, and the answer is yes. Although you may be worried about getting like less than 3 stars on campaign, he is a tank, he's got a lot of armor, and he's pretty good. And so getting that provoke also helps disrupt the flow of the enemy team. And so this is actually a pretty good skill to upgrade, and I recommend getting his basic up for sure. We've been talking about different boons and banes, buffs, debuffs in this game, and I'm going to show you a page from LOTR.gg. This is made by the same people who make Swigo.gg. If you're familiar with them, it's community run. People who play this game set up this website. It is a fantastic tool. I think it is the #1 tool that I use in playing this game. It has so much information, super great UI and website in general, and I'll leave a link to it down in the description below. If you're coming from Swigo or MSF, I'd really highly recommend that you go and check out the ability effects page on this website, because things might be a little bit different than what you're used to, right? For example, I'll give you something that really confused me for a while, because I played both Swigo and MSF. One of the characters, this guy here, Gruher the Brute, he does a basically full team daze at max level, and I thought, oh my god, that's incredible. In Swigo, daze prevents TM gain, prevents assists, and it prevents basically tacking out of turn, and then getting that extra turn meter as well. And I was like, oh, that's really powerful debuff in Swigo. It's probably something I want here as well, because turn meter manipulation is always so good in these games. No. In Lord of the Rings Home, dazed is focus is reduced by 50%. So you have a 50% lower ability to land your debuffs, which is fine, but definitely not what I thought it was. So it's just good to check, and just to make sure that you're putting resources into things that are actually what you think they are, and you don't make the same mistake I did. And of course, in game, you can also sort of click on the keyword there for the buff or debuff. Boons and Banes is what they call them. And it'll show you exactly what it is. The quests down here actually do a pretty good job of guiding you into what you need to be doing next. Typically what happens is you're going to focus on one side, on the light side. You're going to do some quest objective for that, usually reaching some sort of campaign node or upgrading a certain amount of characters or whatever. And then the next thing you'll be doing is, focusing on the shadow side of things, doing something in the shadow campaign, focusing on shadow character. It's good to follow the quests. They're a pretty good guide, especially for the early game. They also give a lot of good resources. So if you're ever lost and kind of, oh, what do I need to be doing next? What do I need to be focusing on? Go to your quests, check out what's going on in there. The other thing you need to be doing every day to stay competitive is completing your daily objectives. I've already completed all of mine today, right? But you have these series of objectives here, and the reason you want to complete them, there's a number of reasons, really. 1, you get 100 gems, premium currency, every day. 2, you get a lot of account XP, actually, for doing your daily objectives. So it's a good way to actually level your account up. 3, after completing all of your daily objectives, you get 5 Strider shards. He's a very good character. He's got a lot of utility, and this is the only way you can get Striders, by completing your daily objectives. And 4, you're going to be getting raid keys by completing your daily objectives. And there are 9 raid keys you can get per day, and they come all from the daily objectives. And it's very important, if you're going to be in a guild, especially in a guild that's doing raids, that you are contributing to the raid keys. The first day you can get to about level 20. It depends on whether you're free to play or not. But basically, if you are free to play, it's going to take you about 120 days to get to level 60, which is the max level. And then obviously with the number of refreshes you do using your premium currency every day, that shortens the time it takes to get to level 60. I would say if you are a spender on the game, you're probably doing somewhere between 6 to 14 gem refreshes a day. And so you're probably somewhere in the 75 to 60 day range for getting to level 60. This is a good time to mention that regardless of whether you're spending money on the game or not, you should be using your premium currency on doing energy refreshes. Do not buy these chests here. The hero chest is not worth it. 600 gems for 15 shards is an absolute steal. A bad way, you're getting robbed. You're being stolen from. By the way, these come up every 4 hours. These free chests, these are definitely worth getting. These are great. I don't get any notifications on any of my accounts from these, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I just know that they're every 4 hours. Also, the gold and character XP chests are also not worth it. It's really just there when you're in a pinch and they can kind of squeeze a little extra money out of you. You should be spending your resources on energy refreshes. For normal energy, you get 350 gem refreshes, and then it's 300, and then 200, and so on and so forth. For the guild energy, you get 100 refreshes, and then 200 refreshes. But we're going to get to the guild store in just a little bit here. I'm going to include a link down below to an account level calculator. Basically, it will let you put in where you are right now, what you're doing in terms of refreshes, and then when you can expect to be certain levels, typically level 60, right? It's made by somebody in the community, Lothar. It's a very great resource, so shout out to him, and I'll put that down in the description below. One of the first things that you're going to end up unlocking is the guild campaign. And now the guild campaign is the most important PvE campaign in Lord of the Rings Home. This is where you're going to make all of the tough decisions. Character shards in this game are king. You want to be focusing on getting your star levels up because they are the most impactful thing for your stats. Let me actually switch over real quick. This is kind of basically how it works for the stats for your character, right? Your total stats is equal to the stats from your gear or your armor. Let's change that to gear. Plus the stats from your levels. This is basically what your base stats are, times a star multiplier. And afterwards, you probably don't have to worry about this if you're starting the game now, but basically at 7 star, it multiplies your base stats by 4, which is massive. So there are 2 things to take away from this. 1, levels make your stars better because they increase your base stats, so you effectively feel the effect of your star power more when you increase the level. And 2, gear stats aren't affected by stars. So I really want to emphasize this. You should be focusing on stars and character shards and then levels. And gear is fine to go for, and you should be doing that for like your arena team and whatnot, but it is not as top of a priority as shards and levels and skills. If you're coming from MSF, it is basically the same shard breakdown as then, right? You need 810 total shards to get to 7 star. If you're coming from a game like Swigo, it is different than Swigo. So here I have the star levels and then how many shards you need to get from, 1 to 2, you need 15 shards. 2 to 3, you need 30 shards. In total, you need 810 shards. The thing I want to point out here is that at 5 star, you need a cumulative 310 shards, right? Which means that at 5 star, which is decently powerful, it's not 7 star, but it's decently powerful, you still have under half the shards you need to get to 7 stars. So we're going to keep that in mind. So the reason that the guild campaign is so important is because of how long it takes to get characters on the hard nodes versus the guild campaign. So basically, to get a character to 7 stars, get 810 shards. If you don't do no refreshes on the hard nodes, it's about 214 days, right? You're limited to 5 attempts on a hard node to get character shards. It's on average about 214 days to get those 810 shards. On the other hand, because in the guild campaign you are not limited to 5 attempts a day, it's so much faster. So if you do 0 refreshes, just kind of compare apples to apples here, it's 30 days, 31 days to get a character to 7 stars. That's for chapters 1 and 2 because they're 8 energy, and then chapters 3 and above, it takes about 39 days. So 214 days versus 31 and 39 days. Huge difference. This is why all of the characters in the guild campaign are at a premium because it's so easy to farm their shards up, and that makes them extra powerful, right? You can get them to 7 stars. Those are the biggest stat boosts. In chapters 1 and 2, the important characters you should be worrying about are Ugluk, Pippin, Ironhide, and Naramiri. Let's go back to chapter 1. Basically, what I did as soon as I unlocked the guild campaign, I used all my guild energy and spent it on Ugluk until I got him to about 2 stars. He's a really good character. He's basically going to be the leader of your Shadow squad for a long time. The Isengard squad is incredible. Both of the starter squads they give you, the Rohan squad and the Isengard squad, are very good, and you can feel completely safe dumping resources into these 2 teams. He's a king in the arena. I use him in my free-to-play account as the leader for my arena squad. He's just a very good character all around. Ironhide, similarly so. He's a large character. He hits like a truck. He's got 2 AoEs. He's incredible. Probably, I think, if you include farmability and no legendaries, I think he's probably the best character in the game. So he's definitely worth unlocking. The 4 that I mentioned are definitely worth unlocking all to 5 stars. So let's talk a little bit about that. You kind of have choices here when we're talking about the guild campaign. I recommend that you get a character to 5 stars, whether you're hard no farming or guild farming. The reason for that is because the raid difficulties, difficulty 3, which is the highest we can currently do, is tuned to 5-star characters. You can start to do difficulty 3 with 5-star characters. Legendary unlocks require 5-star characters. 5-star characters also got they get a pretty significant stat boost from having 5 stars. It's not 7 stars, but it's, they still get a stat boost at 5 stars. The last thing is because it's 310 shards to get to 5 stars, and it's an additional 500 to get to 7 stars. So you're kind of basically coming up halfway on the shard chart to get to 5 stars, which is a good place to stop. So what I mean by you have a little bit of a choice, the thing to consider with the guild campaign is that you want to make sure that you have all the characters you need. Some of those I recommended before you hit level 53. And the reason is because at level 53, you unlock chapter 5 of the guild campaign. And this is obviously way down the line, but it's something you need to be aware of. Chapter 5 is by far the best bang for your buck for energy, for gold, for XP, and for ability materials, especially the purple one. Those are all 3 big bottlenecks in this particular game, and Chapter 5 really does a lot to alleviate those. So you want to be farming Chapter 5 when you can. So before then, you need to make sure that you get these characters, right? On my free-to-play account, I got Ugluck to 7 stars, I got Ironhide to 7 stars, and I got Naramiri to 5 stars. There's basically an eternal debate about whether you should use Naramiri or whether you should use Pippin. In reality, you are probably going to need both of them. They're basically about the same in terms of healing. Pippin has a good boon removal on his basic once you get it all the way up. The healing is basically the same. He can give you might. He's also got a little bit of cleansing as well. It's kind of random, but he's got some of that as well. Very good character. Naramiri, I personally like more, just because I can have a little bit more control over who I'm cleansing. Healing is slightly better, but you can use Naramiri as an unlock for Elrond, and Naramiri works for 3 different challenges. So I personally use Naramiri on my light squad team. But you can make your own decision there. A lot of people are going to tell you that you need to rush Ugluck and Ironhide to 7 stars right away. That's fine, but you also still need to get a character to round out your light squad, because you don't want to just be fighting with 4. It really does help to have that extra heal. So maybe you can do Ugluck and Ironhide for a while, get them unlocked, get rolling on the Shadow campaign, and once you have Chapter 2 unlocked, get Naramiri up. That can help out your light campaign, and then you can go back to farm Ironhide and Ugluck. That's what I did on this particular account. I think it worked pretty well. Once you get to Chapter 3, I'm also going to recommend that you farm Elrahir. He's a very, very important part of the Rivendell squad, and I guess the Ranger squad as well, if you can spare him, if you don't have Elrond maybe. But he's a great damage dealer, and you want to be farming him. One thing is, if you're farming these higher chapters, you're also getting more ability materials, more gold, more XP, all the good stuff, right? And so that's also another reason why I like to farm Naramiri over Pippin, is that Pippin is Chapter 1, Naramiri is Chapter 2. You want to make sure that you get Elrahir to at least 5 stars, and then you can kind of go back and choose who you want to do. So the downside to how I did it, where I went back and I farmed Ugluck and Ironhide to 7 stars, is that I don't have Pippin. Yeah, I don't have them unlocked. And I do think that you probably do want Pippin and Naramiri at some point. So you got to make that choice. It's better to do this all before you hit level 53. And I want to re-emphasize this point. But basically, once you unlock level 53, you now have to make the choice between, should I be getting gold, XP, and purple ability mats, or should I be farming character shards? And there's a big opportunity cost between doing one over the other. So one thing I kind of like to do is farm up enough gold and purple ability mats to kind of get some skills up on some characters I'm working on, let's say on my arena team, and then I go back and maybe farm somebody up 1 star level. And then I kind of go back, and I like to do the little bit of back and forth. This is why I said at the beginning of this section that the guild campaign is basically where you're going to make the hardest decisions related to your account. I don't necessarily recommend getting everybody up to 7 stars and then farming chapter 5 later. The characters I do recommend getting up to 7 stars are ones you're probably going to be using in your arena, and definitely ones that you are going to then also use for legendary unlocks. I think those are good to do, but the timing on that is probably up to you. If you are a spender, I think it's probably safer to say you should go for mostly everything 7 stars. If you are free to play, it's okay to stop at 5 stars, I would say. This is also the first point in the game where I'm going to emphasize that you need to find a good guild. You need to find a good community of people. One, it's going to help you get through the guild campaign, but it's also going to help you access raids later on. It's just an important part of this game. Swigo does this a decent amount as well, but basically CG, the company who runs this game, right, they kind of want everybody to be forming into these communities, and I'm going to strongly recommend that you do that as well. So it might be worth doing a little bit of looking around on Discord. The official Discord has some of that stuff. There's a lot of other Discords as well. My Discord, you can come and look for a guild. I'm going to strongly recommend that you do that for a number of reasons to stay competitive in this game, okay? Related to that, I do want to mention that you can essentially use allies. So if we can just go here. You can use your guild campaign allies here as like a 6th member. Basically goes up there. If your guild campaign ally dies in a guild battle, you won't get 3 stars. That is in contrast to when you're doing, let's say, some normal like light or shadow campaign and they give you a character. If that character dies, you can still get 3 stars. The last thing I'll mention about the guild campaign, and maybe one of the most important things about the guild campaign, is that each node is basically the same in terms of giving you gold, XP, all that sort of stuff. So if I go to chapter 3 here, there's only one character in chapter 3. It's Elra here. If you're just farming chapter 3, right, 935 gold, 240 XP. Same on this node. So if there is a character in the chapter that you're farming for the guild campaign, then you should be farming character shards as well. So it doesn't matter what node you farm here, you want to make sure you're at least farming character shards. I don't think chapter 4 has chapter 4 and chapter 5 do not have any characters on them yet. I hope they add them in the future, especially chapter 5, because that would be amazing. But just to reiterate, it doesn't really matter which of the nodes you farm in a specific chapter because they give you all of the same resources, minus the character shards. You get to choose that, right? The next thing you're going to unlock is the Shadow campaign. And you get to that by beating light side 3-1. So it's still worth putting a lot of resources into your light side team just so you can clear that part and get access to the Shadow campaign. Light 2-9 is what's going to give you Mauher from a quest, I believe. And once you complete that and you have access to the Shadow campaign, basically what ends up happening is that you're just going to use Ugluk and Mauher to kind of go through the normal part of chapter 1 of the Shadow campaign. And then the hard campaign, once you do hard 1-1 in Shadow, you're going to get Dunhar. So then those are basically going to be your 3 characters that you end up using. Those are considered the Isengard 3. It's worth to put a lot of resources into them. At the same time, you should basically be able to work your way towards getting Ironhide unlocked in the guild campaign. He's a 4-star unlock, not a 3-star unlock. He also, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, he's a large character. You can only have one of those in your squad at a time. He's definitely worth it. As I mentioned, he's probably the best non-legendary character all around in terms of farmability and all that sort of stuff. He's very good. So at this point, your light team will probably look something like Eowyn, Eothane, Strider, and if you don't upgrade Frodo, then you can kind of leave him off. Your shadow team will probably look something like Ugluk, Dunhar, and Mauher. These are great characters. They work in a variety of game modes, so I highly recommend that you upgrade them. You do not have to feel weird about upgrading starter characters. Believe me, they're very good. The next thing you unlock are the challenges here. You basically get access to 2 a day, except on Sunday, where you can do all of them. There are, I believe, 6 total, right? I think these are actually very important to max out as fast as you can. They're gated by level. So when you get to a certain level, like this last one here is level 60. When I hit level 60 on my free-to-play account, I'm going to be trying to max these out. The reason I'm saying that is because this is just a really good way to increase the amount of passive resources you have. So if you decide to really focus on one particular team, but you have no challenges, you're sort of, hitting yourself in the knee because you're not able to get all this passive resources. Most of the challenges can be done with teams that are slightly below the recommended power, a few thousand below the recommended power. It used to be a lot more, but that has changed after the star power update, and it's probably just around a few thousand underneath the recommended power, so it's worth trying. And that leads me into my next point, which is that failed attempts to do challenges do not use your attempt. So you can keep trying as many times as you want and forfeiting and re-going again, and you won't lose attempts for the day. So what I have here is basically a board that shows what requires what for all of these particular challenges. So for lost artifacts, you can see it gives you this challenge token here, which is something you use in a shop, and it requires tank and healer. And then I've put in what your standard sort of starter teams get. So for the light side, that is Eowyn, Eothane, Strider. You also eventually unlock Aemir. Aemir's from the Arena store, so you will eventually unlock him. We'll talk about Arena a little bit later. I've included him in here. Those three are considered the Rohan 3, if I haven't already mentioned that. Strider. And then in here, I've already just put Naramiri, because that's my personal sort of choice. And then on the shadow side of thing, you've got the Isengard 3 in Ugluk, Dunhar, and Mauher. And then I also put in Ironhide. That's pretty standard. So if you just do that, right, you cover your bases for a good amount of the challenges. Basically, you have 4 slots that you need to fill. And so you want to find characters to round out your team that will also put you in the nice spots in terms of challenges. The reason I think this is important is basically because as you're leveling, you really only have enough resources to take up 12 characters max. And I mean max. Like, I would say 10 or 11 really. And so you want to choose 2 characters to round out your light and shadow teams that you can also use for basically all of the challenges. One particular route you can go is do something like you can farm Grimlers, who's a shadow 2/1 here. I did this on my free-to-play account. I actually kind of regret it. A better option is probably to go for Morja. He doesn't get very good until later on, but he's also at least an Isengard squad member. I think he's also better than Grimlers here. And then that would give you a shadow, an orc, and an attacker or support here. Grimlers is an attacker and Morja is a support. And then you would only need to fill in one more person here. I did that with Halbarad. We can talk about that as well. One other option is you can do something like Wubate and Elrahir. Elrahir fits the elf and attacker, and Wubate fits the shadow and human here, and that will kind of round things out very nicely. Elrahir is pretty easy to get. He's in Guild Chapter 3. You're going to be probably getting him up anyway for an Elrond team. And Wubate is also pretty easy to get. He's in one of the shops, the Guild Campaign shops, and he's also my recommendation for that particular shop. So it's kind of up to you, but just take a look at what some of these early characters that you can farm are and if they match all of these challenges. Again, that leads me back to my point that I said at the beginning of this, is you do want to make sure you kind of max out the challenges as you're progressing, because it's passive resources and you want to get as many resources now as you can so that you can be better off in the future. The next thing you are going to unlock are the supplies. So we're going to go through store by store and talk about what I think you should be buying and whether it's okay to buy some of these things anyway. Main shop. One of your main bottlenecks ends up being gold. But with that in mind, I still think it's okay to buy some of the shadow or light crystals and some of the essences if you have an excess of gold. Just keep an eye on it. I wouldn't go crazy in here, but it's something you can probably look at every once in a while. If you're a spender, I still wouldn't recommend getting any of these premium characters, except maybe the Troll Brute. If you're going to put a lot of money into him, he's worth it, but it does take a lot of money. Otherwise, these characters, basically, it seems like the cadence is Marquee, wait a month, they go to the premium shop, wait a month again, and then they become farmable. The store timers are kind of all over the place, and I don't know them by heart, so basically I just, whenever I log in, check to see if there's any red dots, and then move on. The guild store, so you get this currency from farming the guild campaign. Typically there are 2 characters in here, Wubate and Miri. Miri is a light side ranger, part of the ranger squad. I'm going to recommend that you farm up Wubate, part of the Haradrim squad. pretty decent raid team. He's got a 2-turn slow. He's a very good character, and I think he's better choice to go for first than Miri. I also will sometimes get not the purple ones, but the blue light or shadow crystals if I have excess. And then I also think something you can get here, something I'm gonna do right now. Definitely try to be getting these rare purple ability mats. And then if you're low in the other ones, it's also worth getting those sometimes. The challenge store. The only way you can get this currency is by doing the challenges, specifically the challenge that gives you this currency. There's a few things in here. Bolg, Halberad, and then essences, and then these basically unique things. You don't really need to worry about these at the moment. A lot of people are kind of making the argument recently that you'd be using this currency on essences. I don't think that's the case. You should still be using this currency to buy character shards. Character shards in this game are king. These are very, very slow farms, though. You're getting either 2 or 5 shards, depending on how much currency you have. It takes a while for them to farm up. What I'm doing on my main account, actually, is I have Halberad at 5 stars now, so now I'm going to get Bolg to 5 stars, and again, it's just so I cover my bases, just in case they introduce a legendary, right, that requires either Bolg or Halberad, and then I'm already ready, and I don't have to spend an absurd amount of extra time doing that. Character shards are more important than gear, so I'm going to recommend that you start this farm and that you just keep going and you finish it, at least until you get to 5 stars. The character you should be doing first, I think still, is Halberad. He's just got a lot of utility. He's a terrific plug-and-play character. He's a great tank. He's a pretty decent healer once you get him going. He's just pretty good overall. Great utility. So I'm going to recommend Halberad over Bolg. Bolg requires that you kind of also have another character called Tordok, who you can't unlock until much further on in the Shadow campaign. Arena Store, which you obviously unlock when you unlock Arena at level 20. You've got a choice between 3 different characters. Sometimes these uniques, again, don't worry about those for now. And character XP will sometimes pop up. Anytime character XP pops up, you should be buying it with your Arena currency because it's a pretty big bottleneck. I'm going to also recommend that you basically focus on AMR. If you have a little bit of extra, right, it's capped at 5,000. If you have a lot, of extra currency, maybe you can also do some on Shagrat. AMR should be your focus here. As you can see on my free-to-play account, I almost have him to 7 stars. He is an incredible character. He is basically a god in the raids. He's really worth getting up. This is the raid store. Obviously doesn't unlock until level 30 when you get the raids. If you are free to play, what I'm going to recommend is that you use this gold raid currency here on getting crystals, either light or shadow crystals. This basically will just act as another income source for crystals. That way you're not using your regular energy on crystals. You can use that on something like character shards. So you can use this combined with your kind of daily challenges across the week to farm up crystals and slowly get the gear level of your characters up. Again, I still think it's better to be farming character shards over gear. So on my free-to-play account, what I do is I don't basically ever farm any of these crystal nodes. I just wait for the challenge to come around or for my guild to finish a raid, and then I am farming, getting crystals that way, and then I slowly get my arena team and other characters up. So my arena team is all gear 8 now, though, and except for 1. So it's slow, but it's fine. I'm doing very good in arena, trust me, for free to play. The last shop here, you only unlock once you get more shards than a 7-star. Basically, this is the shard shop. It's got a conversion of 1-to-1, so 1 shard to 1 shard shop currency. A lot of people don't like that because look at, 200 for 10 rare ability materials. I think you should basically just not worry about this. It's going to take a while to get to a 7-star character, and it's just not something to really worry about. At level 20, you unlock Arena, so you can get there the first day, especially if you're spending money. Basically, the way Arena works is that everybody gets put into what are called shards. So everybody's essentially on the same server, but then you get put into a different Arena shard depending on when you hit level 20. There are 20,000 people in each Arena shard. Anybody who tells you that you do not need to worry about Arena is lying to you or is naive. It's one of the competitive game modes in this game, And it's the only way currently to get the premium currency gems in this game. So you do need to be focusing on it. And the reason I'm saying that is, let's take a look at the payout difference for the different kind of leagues that you can end up in for Arena. At the very top, 620. Obviously, if you're not a whale or a kraken, you're probably not going to get there. However, if you are a free-to-play or a light spender, I think the spots you should be aiming for are Gold 1 to Mithril 1. If you can push higher, obviously go higher. But I think this is a very, very good range to be in, especially if you're aiming to be a pretty competitive player. The reason I'm saying that is because not so much on Gold 1, but definitely once you hit Mithril 2, you are basically getting enough gems every day, the 100 from your objectives and then 186 here, to do 1 guild refresh and 3 normal energy refreshes. That's big. That is massive. That is going to keep propelling your account forward. Obviously, you get more if you're in Mithril 1 here. So my accounts today ended in Mithril 1. This is my free-to-play account, rank 19. This is Shard 9, I believe. So you can do well as a free-to-play player in Arena, but you do have to put a lot of time and focus into it. And what I mean by that is you do have to climb Arena pretty much every day, and you have to know what to do in Arena. So let's talk about that. When you start out, your Arena team is probably going to look something like Eowyn, Eothane, Strider, Ugluk, and maybe Eomer. And I think what I ended up doing was once I unlocked Ironhide, I took out Eothane and put in Ironhide. This is my Arena team currently. This is also the one I suggest for people. You can put Eothane in here if you want. For somebody like Ugluk and do Eowyn lead. The reason I like this setup, people will be like, well, there's no tanks in there. What are you doing? The reason I like this setup is because you have a bunch of control with Ugluk. Not to mention, if you put him in lead, you're getting a little bit of passive healing. If you invest a lot into him, he's surviving a good amount of time, so he's giving that extra healing to all of your squad. Great damage from Strider, great damage from Eomer, great support from Eowyn, getting that might up, she's got a full team cleanse, and she can cleanse herself before she does it. So let's say, I'll give you an example. If Ugluk blinds Eowyn, you can still do her special 2. It will cleanse the blind off of her, and then she can apply disable. It's an incredible move. A cleanse and a disable combined into one. She is a great character. Do not sleep on her. Obviously, the king, Ironhide here. I really strongly recommend that you use Ugluk in your Arena team. He just has so much control, so much tankiness. He's very, very good. And I'm telling you that this is a good team, and I'm showing you that you can use this team to basically get pretty high up in Arena. One of my sort of guiding principles here is that I pretty much always upgrade my Arena team before I upgrade any other part of my Light and Shadow squad. So these two get the most out of my Shadow squad, and then these 3 are the biggest in my Light squad as well. It's not to say you shouldn't upgrade your Light squad, but it's okay if they lag behind a little bit, because getting your Arena team up is pretty important. I'm not going to give you specific Arena strategies here. I think that's part of the fun of the game. You should go and try and figure those out, spend some time with the game. That's how you get to know it, especially if you're trying to be competitive, right? I will tell you some things. Crits are plus 30% damage. Blocks are minus 30% damage, right? And you have to try and figure out exactly what the interactions are for stacks of buffs. So what I mean is, a multi-hit attack is not going to take off more than 1 stack of Provoke, but it can do more damage. It can take away more than 1 stack of Unbreakable. Unbreakable being that buff that prevents you from being killed off after you reach 1 HP. Just because a character does something on their basic does not mean that when they are called to do an assist that they are going to get that same effect. It really depends on certain situations. Again, I'm not going to explain that here. But just kind of to wrap up here, the whole point of this Arena section, outside of giving you what I think is a pretty decent team as a free-to-play player, even as a non-free-to-play player, if you don't have Elrond, is Arena is currently an important game mode because that's where you get the vast majority of your premium currency. Not to mention, you have to do 2 Arena battles to get that through that objective, and that particular objective also gives you 3 raid keys. So they're kind of forcing you in a way to play this game mode. Obviously, you can just go in and forfeit, but if you want to be competitive, I do highly recommend you do your Arena battles. One other thing outside of the premium currency is that you get these arena coins, these tokens, which you can then obviously funnel right back into a character like Aomer, get him back up close to 7 stars. I think on my free-to-play account here, Aomer is, yeah, I need 200 more shards to get him to 7 star. He's obviously very close to getting maxed out. He is a very, very good character. By the way, if you have found this video helpful or informational at all, please hit the subscribe button. It is free. If you haven't done it already, it helps the channel grow. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. With that, let's move on to the next thing that I want to talk about here, which is the Sam's campaign event. Okay, basically this unlocks level 25. It has its own special energy. These apples here, you get 6 of them. Do not refresh the apples. Don't spend premium currency on that. At tier 1, you can essentially, there's 2 tiers. At tier 1, you can essentially go through the whole campaign. You don't have to have any special requirements. You can just use your light squad, basically. And I recommend doing that. Anytime you have the apple energy, you go in here, you do your sand battles, you get out. You don't need to 3-star anything, but it's a good source of a little bit of extra gear and all that sort of stuff. At the end of that, once you complete all of these, tier 1, you will be able to unlock a 3-star Sam. Tier 2, on the other hand, requires that you have the rest of the Road to Rivendell characters at 4-star, and Sam can be 3-star. So you would have to farm the Road to Rivendell characters, and then you're obviously gated by getting Strider up to a certain star amount, depending on how long you've been playing the game. Personally, I don't think this is something you should prioritize unless you are going for hobbits, in which case, yeah, you should obviously be doing the tier 2 part because that's a great source of extra resources. I don't prioritize hobbits in either of my accounts, and so I basically have not completed this tier 2 of the Gardener's Journey for either of them, and I'm okay with that for the time being. It doesn't go away. It's perpetually there, right? So you don't have to worry about it. You can put it on the back burner when I get around to it, I'll get around to it sort of thing. Again, gear is not as important as character shards. And so you'd be putting resources into a team that if you're not really going to use, it's basically a waste. Sam's Journey is also one of the reasons that people tell you that you should choose Pippin over Naramiri. Again, I'm not entirely sold on that, but these are your decisions to make here. I think it's probably basically a 50-50 split in the community between whether you should go Pippin or Naramiri. Again, I do actually think you should probably get both because they're both very good characters to have for the raids. We're closing in on the end here. Once you hit level 30, there are a number of things that open up for you. Marquee events, legendary events, and raids. All 3 are very important. We're going to go through them pretty quickly here. Marquees, there's not a lot to talk about except that this is how they release new characters pretty typically here. You will get a free 3-star character out of a marquee, which is great. Basically, after getting that 3-star character, the next sort of tier here, it'll either be 5 or 6, is one where if you put a few, some amount of resources, you are going to be able to get through this, and they'll give you 10 light crystals or shadow crystals, 15k character XP, and 50k gold. It's pretty wildly different depending on the marquee, whether you're able to get through it on little resources or you do have to do some investment. Some of them took no resources at all. Some take, a decent number of resources just to get through this amount. So it's worth checking in. Basically, once a marquee is released, people sort of have this race to figure out how low they can go to actually clear this tier. So it's good to check in the community, see, okay, how low do I need to invest before I can get this extra stuff here? I haven't done this for Faramir on my free-to-play account. I'm not particularly interested. What's nice about the marquees, free 3-star character, right, which you can then use for other types of game modes down the line, specifically raids right now. You get a little bit of extra resources sometimes. They are a week long. And one thing I think, if you're coming from MSF, I think a lot of people from MSF sort of expect a small story or narrative to accompany the marquees. It's not quite the case here. Basically, the marquee event is just to show you how to play it, the character, a few of the characters you should maybe put this character with, how that team plays together. That's all. It's not some sort of narrative or story-driven event. It's just that. They don't typically rerun the marquees. They're sort of changing that for the Arwen marquee. They're going to rerun that. I don't think that's pretty standard practice here. We'll see if that continues to happen into the future. Maybe that would be a really nice change just to let people sort of get the characters again for 3 stars for free. The cadence of after they're released from the marquee and going into the premium store here is about a month. So Gimli and Legolas were marquees about a month ago. I can't do anything there, right? Gimli and Legolas were marquees about a month ago. And then a month from then, they'll probably be added to either the shops or some sort of nodes to be farmed. A great way to track this, and this is going to sort of transition us to talking about legendaries as well, is this site's LOTRevents.com. This is the marquee page. Again, I will leave that in the description below. This was made by the people who made LOTR.gg as well. I think specifically SigSig, so shout out to him. And it basically shows you, okay, when did the marquee happen? When does it go to shipments? Or basically, when does it cost gems to buy them? And then when does it become farmable? Also, this will have legendary events. We only have one legendary event at the moment. It's the Elrond event. We've only had it once. But in the future, it will track how often these legendary events are running so that you can kind of time your farms for when you think this next legendary might be coming. Speaking of legendary events, you need 5-star characters to do legendary events. The current only legendary in the game is Elrond. You need 5 elf characters at 5 stars. They don't have to be Rivendell elves, but they need to be elf characters at 5 stars. You will then unlock Elrond at 5 stars. Like most of these other types of games, you probably should be prioritizing getting legendary characters. They're just very good. They basically blow all the other characters out of the water. And we're just at a point in the game, we're early enough in the game where we only have one legendary. There'll probably be a second legendary either by the end of this year or early next year. But we only have one for now. And what that means is that there's not like really some optimized starter strategy to get certain legendaries over others at this moment. It's just when you can, you should be getting your elves up to 5-star for when Elrond comes around the first time. And then, of course, going for 7 stars so that probably the next time around you'll have all of that ready. Let's talk about raids. Raids are basically one of the biggest game modes in the game right now. I think they're very important. It's this little Palantir over here. One of the big reasons you need to be getting into an active and not necessarily good, but at least an active guild, especially if you want to stay competitive, you need to be able to do raids. So before we get started, I just want to say that I'm just going to give you the general basics of how the raid operates. This is not going to be an in-depth raid guide. I can leave some videos for top tips on Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 in the cards, and then I'll swap those out if I ever do some more in-depth guides on this type of stuff. But I just want to give you the basics so that you know the ground rules. Once your guild has 2,000 keys, you can start to launch a raid. You can get up to 2,500 keys. So basically, if you need to wait a little bit, you can wait a little bit and you don't have to worry about wasting keys. Each member can contribute 9 keys each day. If you have 36 members, it basically works out to the math of you will have a raid basically every 6 days. It's also structured that so that like even if you have 32 members, you're basically still going to be able to do a raid every 6 or 7 days. So you can kind of, few people can miss the raid keys and like you can be missing a few members, especially if they're swapping around, and you can still be okay to basically do 1 raid a week, which should be your goal as a guild. There are some mercenary rules, so let's cover those. Basically, somebody who has just joined your guild cannot contribute raid keys for 24 hours. They can also not participate in a raid that has been started 24 hours before their 24-hour timer is up. So if they join the guild and you start a raid right away, they won't be able to participate. The biggest one, though, is they have to wait 6 days after their last raid attack before they can do another raid for another guild. So it's okay if it's the same guild, but if it's another guild, then they have to wait 6 days. That's something to keep in mind, especially as like guilds are reforming or people are being swapped out, that some people might not be able to do it. Okay, let's say you've started the raid. What's great about this raid is it's very similar to the Swigo Crate raid, if you're familiar with that. And what I mean by that is essentially that every time you go in, you get to choose a difficulty. So you can choose difficulty 3 for maybe your best team. You can choose difficulty 2 for some of your other teams. You can choose difficulty 1 for, kind of your bottom of the barrel teams, right? Each time you attempt, you can choose the difficulty. And that's very important. So how do you know which difficulty to choose? Well, I would say actually the recommended power is a pretty good guide here. Basically, difficulty 1 is meant to be kind of 3-star, but not or under characters, and they're not very geared. Difficulty 2 is for 3-star characters that are pretty geared. You're going to be somewhere in the range of like 12k to even up to 24k, I would say. Difficulty 3, which I don't recommend you start doing until your team is maybe up into the 30ks, is really tuned for characters, all characters having 5 stars and being pretty close to max. So the difference here is that you can get more max points at a higher difficulty. So 900,000 points at difficulty 3 versus the 100,000 points you could get at difficulty 1. Those points are what going to basically determine what kind of rewards you get. 2 types of rewards. There's your overall guild reward, okay? So the first box is very low, just 1 million points. The next box is actually a lot more difficult to get to, right? 72 million points. This is going to be cumulative across your entire guild and across all the chapters. So all of your guild score, all of your guild from chapter 1, those scores, all of your guild scores from chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, so on. We currently only have 2 chapters in the game. Chapter 3 is going to be coming out in late September probably, and then chapter 4 is going to be coming out at the end of October, I believe. That's the first type of reward. Guild rewards persist through the chapters so that, you're not trying to get 72 million points each chapter. Personal rewards, however, are chapter by chapter. So what I mean by that is if I get 1 million points on the first chapter, I can get all the way up to this reward here. And it's all this stuff, basically. Then if I get another 1 million points on chapter 2, this resets, and I can get all the way up to 1 million points again here on chapter 2. So you're able to get the personal rewards for each chapter. That's going to be very, very big when you consider the fact that there will eventually be 4 chapters in the raid, and so you have an opportunity to essentially get the personal reward track 4 different times. There are 3 ways to get Gandalf shards, who is the raid character for the Mines of Moria raid. One is through the guild rewards. You can get him starting in the second box here, but again, this is a pretty difficult goal to get to, especially with only 2 chapters released currently. With all 4, I think it'll be a lot more manageable. 2, personal reward track, which you can get for each chapter, right? So if you get 2,175,000 points in each chapter, you're going to get 4 Gandalf shards total. The third and last place you can get Gandalf shards is in the raid store, and it is via these Mithril raid coins. Mithril raid coins are basically rewards that they're like a better type of raid currency, and they really only come towards the end of the guild boxes and at the end of the personal track. So basically my thinking there is that you get some Mithril raid coins and you're going to use those to finish up getting Gandalf to 7-star. But the main ways you're going to get him are through the personal track and through the guild reward track. So who should you be using as like your starter raid teams? Well, it turns out that you can basically use the starter teams that they give you. Isengard are pretty good at the raid, and so are Rohan. I think they do very well in both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 at least. And so, again, those are teams you don't have to worry about sinking resources into because they're good at pretty much all of the game modes. Second thing, though, the Marquees they give you are pretty good at forming sort of like a mishmash raid team, especially if you put a little bit of resources into them. So you get 5 attempts total per chapter. That means you can use 5 separate teams. One of the things I should mention that is actually very important about the raids is that when you go and do a run, after it's over, or if you forfeit, it'll take you to a screen. You can either choose to submit that score, or you can choose to kind of discard it and go again. So you're, again, not worried about, I need to make sure that this is my right kind of raid set. You don't need to put anything on airplane mode. You don't got to do any of that. You can basically go to the end screen, say, no, discard, I don't want that, and try again. The last thing I'll say about raids, which maybe I should have started with, is that for the Mines of Moria raids, for all chapters, for all difficulties, there are no level restrictions, there are no gear restrictions, and there are no character restrictions. I know the characters allowed screen down here can be kind of confusing, and, oh, well, I can only use these 5 characters. Nope. You can use your entire roster. There are no restrictions at all for all chapters of the Mines of Moria raid. They've confirmed that. So don't feel afraid about, oh, am I going to be able to use these characters in the raid? You will be able to use the characters. The last topic of this video, I want to cover some of the main bottlenecks that you're going to encounter in this game. The biggest ones, I think, that people notice the most, at least, are gold and character XP. You need character XP to take your characters up levels, but you also need gold. You need gold for a lot of things, right? You need gold for star promotions, upgrading skills, all that sort of stuff. So gold you're going to get a lot more of because it's required for so many different things. The character XP is specific to leveling up characters. So here I have on a per level basis how much it takes to basically go up the next level. So you can see the gold is in blue, the red is character XP. At about level 40, you actually require more character XP than you do gold to go up. And this kind of actually corresponds to, especially if you're a free-to-play player, at level 40, you're going to start to feel a huge character XP crunch. You're going to start getting all this excess gold, but your character XP is going to be basically non-existent. That gets offset for people who spend money, and that sort of happens later on when you get closer to 60, when you spend money, but it still will hit you. Don't worry, it's coming for you. These are the two biggest, I would say, bottlenecks. Raids and doing raids actually really help alleviate these two bottlenecks. They don't make them completely non-existent, but they do help quite a bit. So it's worth investing in making sure your raid teams can do well. Two other bottlenecks that you're going to encounter are the light and shadow crystals and the purple ability materials. First, let's talk about the crystals. Let's go to Aowen, if I can find her really quick. Okay, she's gear 7. Gear 8 is currently, I think, basically what people can get to right now, viably. And you're going to look. This takes 12 shadow crystals, or light crystals. This is going to take 16 total crystals, right? These are pretty hard to come by. 16 crystals, right? This is going from gear 7 to gear 8. It takes a lot. And each gear level, it basically kind of doubles how many crystals you need. So one thing I tell people is that you can kind of have this passive crystal income. I've been saying it the whole video. Character shards are more important than gear. So you can use the challenges to get a crystal income, and you can use your raid tokens to get a crystal income. You can slowly build up the gear of your characters that way. It is a bottleneck, but it's something I think you should kind of not worry about too much. You can sort of manage it pretty easily. And then the last bottleneck that I want to talk about are these epic ability materials here. These purple ability mats. Basically, any skill over 4, I believe. It's 4 and above, I think. Maybe it's 3, but it could be 4. Starts to use a lot of those purple ability mats, especially when you get to level 5 and 6. It's basically, you're spending like 1,500 to 2,000 purple ability mats to get a character basically up to max skill level. This is why, this is going to link back to something I talked about earlier, the guild campaign. This is why the guild campaign is so important and why those choices are so hard. Because once you get to chapter 5 of the guild campaign, doing these nodes here gives you so many more rare ability materials. And it really helps to alleviate that. And then you can get your arena team and maybe some of your top raid teams up to the skill level that they need to be. That is, of course, at the cost of not being able to farm those great characters in chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. So you kind of have to balance that. Also, chapter 5 is really good at alleviating both gold and XP. It's chapter 5 is the best. It is the best for alleviating pretty much all of the bottlenecks except crystals, and that is why you have to consider what you're going to do once you reach level 53. Do I just farm guild chapter 5, or do I go back sometimes and get character shards? You can switch off, but it is the biggest decision I think you have to make in this game at the moment. And with that, I think we're going to end the video there. If you made it all the way to the end, I kind of applaud you. I think this is going to be a very long and information-dense video. Again, if you haven't subscribed, it would really help out the channel. If you do subscribe, appreciate that a lot. And come check out the Discord if you have any other questions. I'm happy to answer them. With that, take it easy.